This is a romantic comedy about an airline, a workaholic CEO, an awkward British lawyer whose sister is in prison for removing a man's head with a machete, and a company policy that says you absolutely cannot date your coworkers, which, this being a romantic comedy, is less a rule and more a dare. It is silly, it is filthy, it is genuinely funny, and after the last few movies I broke down, which were, respectively, a murder marriage, a prison weep fest, and a blood-harvesting tragedy, I have never been so happy to recap something where the biggest casualty is a man's dignity at a deposition. Let's go. Fasten your seatbelts. Your tray tables are the only thing that's going to stay in the upright and locked position. We open on the worst first date in recorded history, and it's not even our heroine's fault. Meet Jackie Cruz, the CEO of Air Cruise, a major airline, and she is on a date with a man named Larry who spends the entire evening sobbing about his ex-wife Stacy. He cries when Dallas is mentioned because that's where they met. He drunkenly drags Jackie up to dance and gets them screamed at by a stranger. And then, as a closing argument for romance, he cheerfully volunteers, completely unprompted, that he is, to this very day, in ways no one needed described over the appetizers, extremely not over his ex-wife. On the first date, to the CEO, Jackie noped out of there so fast she left a vapor trail, and honestly this scene exists for one reason, to establish that Jackie Cruz is a woman who has completely given up on her personal life, and given the available options like Larry, you genuinely can't blame her. And can we sit for just a moment in the wreckage of Larry, because Larry is a masterpiece of a man, the kind of dating disaster that should be studied in universities. Larry does not have a single conversational gear that isn't Stacy. You hand this man a menu and he finds a way to make the appetizers about Stacy. The restaurant plays a song, it's their song, he and Stacy's, and now we're crying into the breadbasket. He hears the word Dallas, which is a city of 1.5 million people, and he hears only the place his marriage was born and died. This is a man who has weaponized grief into a personality, and Jackie, a CEO who runs a multi-billion-dollar airline, who manages thousands of employees and a fleet of aircraft, cannot manage to get one weepy divorcee to stop describing his self-care routine across a candlelit table. It is the most efficient character introduction in the genre, because in 3 minutes you understand that Jackie has tried. She has put on the dress and the heels and the brave face, and the universe has responded by sending her Larry, and any reasonable woman would conclude, as Jackie does, that the dating pool is less a pool and more a swamp, and that she should simply go back to the office where at least the disappointments are profitable. And the movie has so much fun establishing what a fortress Jackie has built around herself. At the office, she is a legend of terror. The staff trade survival tips about being in her presence the way medieval peasants traded tips about not angering a dragon. We hear secondhand the rules. Don't babble, but don't say nothing, say the exact right amount. Do not, under any circumstances, compliment her shoes, it ruined a man's entire elevator ride. She likes the smell of lavender, so try to smell like lavender. She hates the sound of breathing, so if you absolutely must breathe, take a quick little gasp out the side of your mouth so she doesn't hear it. These are the actual instructions a new lawyer gets before meeting her, and the joke, the lovely joke the whole movie is building, is that this monster, this unbreathable lavender-scented gorgon, is secretly the warmest, goofiest, most starved-for-connection person in the building. She just welded the door shut years ago, and we're going to spend 2 hours watching someone pry it back open. And the way the movie delivers these rules is genuinely inspired, because we never see Jackie do anything monstrous, we only hear the legend, the oral tradition the staff has built up around her like a campfire ghost story. There's an entire mythology here that nobody can fully confirm, but everybody devoutly believes. Some guy on the 4th floor allegedly made eye contact for too long and was redeployed to a hub in a city no one can locate on a map. Someone brought her coffee at the wrong temperature and, depending on who's telling it, either resigned that afternoon or simply ceased to exist. The lavender thing escalates with every retelling until you half expect to learn the new hires are required to bathe in it. And the funniest part, the part the movie is quietly winking at, is that none of these people have actually witnessed Jackie do a single cruel thing. They have constructed an entire terrifying deity out of secondhand panic and one badly received shoe compliment, and they police each other's breathing on her behalf, and Jackie, the actual human at the center of this hurricane of rumor, is sitting in her office eating lunch alone, wishing literally anyone would talk to her like a person. The gap between the monster they fear and the woman who exists is the whole comedy and the whole heart of the film in one tidy package. Her one real ally is Sydney, her best friend and right hand, who is enormously, gloriously pregnant and absolutely refuses to acknowledge it as a reason to slow down for even 1 second. Sydney announces with total sincerity that she was artificially inseminated specifically to avoid the distraction of a relationship, that her home will contain only herself, the baby, and an army of nanas, and that she fully intends to be back at her desk the day after giving birth. Sydney is what would happen if a spreadsheet achieved consciousness and decided to have a child as a productivity hack, and she is fiercely, ride-or-die loyal to Jackie, which means she spends the whole film acting as both Jackie's conscience and her most aggressive hype woman, often in the same breath. The two of them together are the actual love story this movie is too horny to admit it's about. And I have to give Sydney her flowers because the inseminated for efficiency bit could have been a one-note gag, and instead the movie lets her be a fully committed maniac about it. Sydney didn't fall into single motherhood, she project managed it. She looked at the romantic entanglements available to a woman of her station, presumably encountered a few Larrys of her own, and decided that the entire emotional apparatus of a relationship was a bottleneck she could simply engineer out of her life. A baby to Sydney is a deliverable. She speaks about her impending child the way other executives speak about a quarterly launch, with milestones and contingencies and an aggressive return-to-desk timeline that would make a labor lawyer faint. She is so allergic to the idea of slowing down that she treats her own body's months-long countdown to childbirth as a vaguely rude interruption that keeps trying to insert itself into her calendar. And the genius of it is that her relationship with Jackie is the one place all that armor cracks, because Sydney loves Jackie with a ferocity that has nothing to do with productivity. And the two of them bicker and conspire and hype each other up like the work wives they fundamentally are, which is why, when Sydney later corners Daniel mid-delivery to extract gossip, it lands, because we already know this woman will let absolutely nothing, not even the act of becoming a parent, stop her from getting the dirt on her best friend's love life. Because Jackie is married to her job, and the job is the airline her father built. Captain Jack Cruz, war hero, entrepreneur, hell of a storyteller, the man whose face is on the commercials, the legend. Jackie runs the whole company now brilliantly, and yet the board and her father still treat her like daddy's little girl. Her dad literally calls her gordita in board meetings, which she has to clarify means little fatty, in front of everyone, because nothing says respect your CEO like your father nicknaming you little fatty during a fiscal review. Jackie has built this airline into a giant, and she still can't get the old men in the room to see her as anything but Jack's kid, and that quiet, simmering injustice is the real engine of the whole movie, hiding underneath all the dirty jokes. Now meet our leading man, Daniel Blanchflower, a British in-house lawyer who has recently arrived from London, and who is, to put it gently, a disaster in a nice suit. He's polite to the point of malfunction, he says cheerio without irony. And he is so foreign to the concept of American small talk that he has an entire bewildered argument with a coworker named Claire about why she keeps answering the question all right. Claire with actual information about her life, like her thermal underwear rash, when all right is not a question. It's just a noise British people make at each other. Daniel is a man who genuinely believes that if you ask someone a question, you are expected to want the answer, which, in an office, makes him a kind of accidental terrorist. And honestly, the all-right Claire runaround might be the most accurate depiction of British-American culture shock ever committed to film, because Daniel cannot compute that an entire nation has agreed to ask each other questions that are not questions, and give each other greetings that contain no information. He asks Claire how she's doing because he was raised to believe that's a sacred inquiry, and Claire, an American and honest woman, tells him in full and devastating detail about her life and her ailments and the specific saga of her thermal underwear situation, and Daniel stands there visibly recalculating his entire understanding of human interaction. He came from a country where you can spend 40 years living next to a man, nod at him every single morning, mutter all right at him, get all right back, and never once exchange a fact. To him, Claire answering the question is like being slapped with the truth. He wanted the comforting noise. He got a medical report. And the beautiful thing is Daniel never adapts, he just keeps walking into these encounters armed with politeness and walking out the other side concussed by sincerity, a man perpetually one small talk exchange away from needing to sit down. And Daniel has a particular relationship with one swear word that the movie cannot get enough of, because where he's from, a certain four-letter word that rhymes with bunt is not an insult, it's punctuation. It's a term of endearment. It's how he processes grief. He explains at length to a horrified HR-adjacent coworker named George that you can use this word for a parking ticket, for an old friend, for a mouse on your kitchen table, for a goal your team scores. It's a Swiss Army knife of a word, and Daniel deploys it with such warm, genuine affection that George has to formally write him up while Daniel insists, sincerely, that he's not one, he's just from a place where everyone is. It's the funniest cultural exchange program in cinema. And George, bless George, is the perfect foil for this, because George is the human resources immune system of an American office and Daniel is a foreign substance it does not know how to neutralize. George has a form for everything except this. There is no checkbox on the incident report for an employee who deployed the forbidden word not in anger, not as harassment, but with the misty-eyed warmth of a man recalling his grandmother. George keeps trying to explain the gravity of the situation, and Daniel keeps cheerfully agreeing that yes, of course, terrible word, dreadful word, and then immediately using it again to describe how lovely the weather is, and you can see George's soul slowly leaving his body. The movie understands something true here, which is that you cannot discipline a man into a different culture, and Daniel genuinely, sincerely does not experience the word as a weapon. He experiences it as a hug, and watching George try to translate corporate policy into a language Daniel's nervous system simply does not speak is the kind of comedy that comes from two people being completely correct and completely incompatible at the same time. By the end, George isn't even mad, he's just tired, the way you get tired arguing with the tide. So how do these two collide? Through a breakfast burrito. The airline's star litigator, a terrifying alpha named Peter Vance, a man who threatens to depose people's souls and brags about making opposing counsels. Let's say confidence goes soft, chokes on a recklessly large sausage chunk the very morning of a huge deposition, and ends up in the hospital with a tube down his throat, communicating via hand signals his intent to sue the food truck. With the general down, the colonel gets called up, and the colonel, God help everyone, is Daniel. And I want to pause on Peter Vance as we first meet him, because the movie does not introduce him gently, it introduces him as a force of nature in an expensive tie. This is a man who does not have conversations, he conducts hostile takeovers of them. He talks about depositions the way a shark talks about a swim. He brags openly with relish about reducing opposing counsel to quivering wrecks, about the psychological warfare, about breaking people for sport before they even sit down. He is the platonic ideal of the litigator who has confused being a lawyer with being a predator. And the entire office is terrified of him in a completely different flavor than they're terrified of Jackie, because Jackie's terror is about disappointing her, and Vance's terror is about being personally dismantled in front of witnesses. So it is the single greatest comeuppance in the film that this towering apex courtroom monster, this man who threatens to depose souls, is taken down not by a rival, not by a judge, not by a clever motion, but by an aggressively oversized chunk of breakfast sausage that he, in his hubris, attempts to swallow whole on the morning of the biggest case of his career. The universe looked at the most arrogant man in the building and chose a burrito as its instrument of justice, and frankly, the universe understood the assignment. He's thrown into the deep end of a massive lawsuit on 5 minutes' notice, sent to depose people in a case where rival Falcon Airlines is accusing Jackie of getting prime airport gates in Dallas by either bribing or sleeping with the chairman of the airport board. And Daniel, sweating, fumbling, accidentally complimenting Jackie's shoes when he was explicitly warned not to, somehow pulls it off, because it turns out he actually read the entire case file on the off chance his boss might choke on a sausage. He's competent. Under all the flop, sweat, and apologizing, the man is genuinely good at his job, and Jackie, who values exactly one thing in a human being, the willingness to give a damn about work, notices. And the deposition itself is a comic set piece, because Daniel is being asked to defend his brand new boss against a lawsuit that is, essentially, an accusation that she's a slut. The opposing lawyers keep circling the same insinuation that Jackie flew to Dallas on her private jet, had dinner with the airport board chairman, and the very next day he handed her the gates he'd already promised to the rival airline, so clearly she either bribed him or slept with him. They keep pushing. Did you go back to his place? Did you go to the ATM? And Jackie, magnificently, just turns it around on them. Okay, which is it? Did I bribe him or did I sleep with him? You tell me. That's what we're here to find out. And under the table, the senior partner is hissing at Daniel to object to everything, to fight every word, to be the snarling attack dog that Vance would be. And Daniel refuses calmly because he can see something they can't, that the other side has no actual evidence, just innuendo, and you don't win by snarling. You win by letting them talk until they hang themselves. Which is exactly what happens because Daniel saves his real move for the rival airline's own CEO, Bill Button, who, it turns out, knows suspiciously specific details about Jackie's dinner, what she ordered, the filet, what Johnson ordered, the Chilean sea base. And Daniel, gently like a man pulling a single thread, asks the only question that matters. How do you know all that? And Bill stammers out a word salad about an interested party who happened upon the knowledge of the facts. And Daniel, with the politest possible knife, asks the court reporter, a delightful woman named Vanessa, to read the gibberish back out loud, slowly, so everyone can hear how much it sounds like a man who has been paying someone to spy. It's a small, surgical, deeply satisfying lawyer movie victory, and it's the moment Jackie realizes this anxious, shoe-complimenting Brit is the real thing. He didn't win by being the biggest dog in the room. He won by being the smartest, which for a woman who's spent her whole life being talked over by loud men might as well be a love letter. And that's the spark. Because the one love language Jackie Cruz speaks is competence, and Daniel just spoke it fluently in a room full of people trying to destroy her. She apologizes to him afterward, which she explains is her least favorite activity on Earth, and tells him it's nice to meet someone who gives a shit, that for most people work is something you endure until the weekend, but for her it's the best part. And Daniel gets it. He gets her. Two workaholics recognizing each other across a conference table, which, in this movie, is basically eyes meeting across a crowded room, except the room is a deposition about possible bribery. And I do want to linger on Vanessa, the court reporter, for a beat, because she becomes the movie's secret MVP, the straight woman to all this courtroom chaos, the one person in the room whose only job is to type down every absurd thing these lawyers say with no emotional reaction whatsoever. When Daniel pulls his big move and asks her to read back Bill Button's flailing word salad, Vanessa has to recite, deadpan in open court, a sentence so tortured and evasive that it could only have been assembled by a guilty man trying to sound innocent. And she delivers it with the flat, unbothered cadence of someone reading a grocery list, which is exactly what makes it lethal. There is nothing more devastating than having your own panicked nonsense read back to you slowly by a neutral professional in a quiet room while everyone listens. Vanessa is the human echo that turns a man's lie into evidence, and she does it without a flicker of expression, the unsung hero of the whole scene, a woman who has clearly heard every kind of lie there is and stopped being impressed by any of them somewhere around her second decade on the job. There is, of course, one tiny problem, and it is plastered on the wall in big corporate letters. Air Crews has a zero-tolerance policy on interoffice relationships. Don't shit where you eat, as Captain Jack so elegantly put it. So naturally, the entire rest of the movie is these two people shitting precisely where they eat, with escalating enthusiasm, while insisting to each other and themselves that absolutely nothing is happening. Daniel, for his part, is so smitten that he confesses to his sister that he got an erection simply from shaking Jackie's hand, which is the kind of detail that tells you exactly what register this movie is operating in. It is not a subtle film. It is a film where a man reports a handshake boner to a family member. I love it here. And the company policy itself deserves a moment of appreciation, because the movie treats this single line of corporate boilerplate as if it were the wall of a maximum security prison, and then spends 2 hours gleefully watching two people pole vault over it. Zero tolerance. Don't shit where you eat. It's printed on the wall, it's in the handbook, it's the kind of rule that exists in every office precisely because it is the rule everyone is most tempted to break. And the comedy of the whole middle stretch is that Daniel, a lawyer, a man who reveres rules, who reads policy documents for pleasure, who treats the employee handbook as something close to scripture, is now in the position of having to argue himself out of the one rule he most believes in because his entire body has voted against his entire training. He keeps citing the policy to Jackie like a man reading himself his own rights, and she keeps overruling him, and he keeps being delighted to be overruled. And the rule, that proud, stern, zero-tolerance rule, just sits on the wall watching itself get demolished, day after day, by the two people most responsible for enforcing it. There is no funnier sight in an office comedy than the rule makers becoming the rule breakers and being so bad at hiding it that the rule itself seems embarrassed. Speaking of the sister, this is Daniel's secret, and it's a great one. Daniel didn't move to New Jersey for the bagels. His sister Lizzie is in an American prison on serious charges because she, in her own cheerful words, chopped a fella's head off with a machete on the grounds that she didn't like the, you guessed it, four-letter word. Daniel gave up a huge career in London and moved across an ocean to be her lawyer and try to keep her off death row, and he's so good at it that she's gone from facing the electric chair to, in her telling, living it up and absolutely cleaning up with the posh birds inside. Lizzie is unhinged, foul-mouthed, completely devoted to her little brother, and exists mostly to scream excellent advice at him about his love life, like a feral Greek chorus in a prison jumpsuit. She is the reason Daniel keeps mysteriously disappearing on weekends, which becomes a plot point because to Jackie, a man with a secret he won't explain looks exactly like a man who is cheating, and Jackie has been burned by exactly that before. And the scenes between Daniel and Lizzie are some of the warmest in the movie in the most demented possible way, because here is this gentle, anxious, apologetic man, and across the prison table is his sister, who removed a human head with a garden tool and feels completely fine about it. And the dynamic between them is just pure sibling love. She bullies him. She interrogates him about his sex life with the tenderness of a sledgehammer, informing him his lack of action has likely given him certain anatomical problems, demanding to know if the woman he likes is, in her words, fit. And when Daniel insists it isn't like that, that this woman is smart, dynamic, incredible, that he got a boner just shaking her hand, Lizzie delivers the entire movie's romantic thesis in 4 words. Ask her out then. To which Daniel gives every responsible reason he can't: the company policy, his ethics, the fact that he could be disbarred, that he could lose his visa, that you do not shit where you eat. And Lizzie, a convicted murderer, looks at her brother lecturing her about ethics and just calls him an idiot with love. She's right, of course. She's always right. The most morally compromised person in the film is the only one with the clarity to see that Daniel is a coward hiding behind a rulebook, and the rest of the movie is him slowly, helplessly proving her correct. And the prison visiting room becomes this perfect recurring set, because it's the one place Daniel cannot perform competence, cannot lawyer his way out, cannot hide behind British politeness, because Lizzie has known him his entire life and can see straight through every wall he's ever built. He shows up in his nice suit, the picture of the button-down professional, and within 90 seconds his sister has him squirming like he's 13 again, because she asks the questions nobody at the office would dare, the rude ones, the real ones, the ones that go straight past the suit and into the soft, frightened center of him. She interrogates him about this woman with the subtlety of a battering ram, demanding specifics, demanding intentions, demanding to know what exactly he's planning to do about it. And Daniel does what Daniel does. He hides behind the rules, the policy, the visa, the ethics, the catastrophic professional consequences, and Lizzie, a woman who is in prison for one of the most decisive acts a person can commit, just stares at her baby brother hiding from a crush behind a stack of paperwork and tells him plainly that he's an idiot. And the dynamic is so warm precisely because she's the dangerous one and he's the careful one, and yet she's the one with all the courage about love, which tells you everything about how badly Daniel has let fear run his life. The most reckless person he knows is the one giving him the soundest emotional advice, from inside a building specifically designed to hold reckless people. Because Daniel is so far gone it's medical. This is a man who is composed, professional, and lethally competent in a courtroom, and a complete puddle the second Jackie Cruz is in the room. He pines like a Victorian poet who's been hit on the head. He volunteers eagerly to take on more of her work, to be in more of her meetings, to suffer through any task as long as it puts him in her orbit. And he is convinced he's being subtle about it, which he is not, because the entire office can see it, his coworkers narrate it, his sister can smell it through prison glass. He is the world's most obvious secret crush, a man whose every attempt to act normal around his boss only broadcasts louder that he is, completely and irreversibly, gone. Things escalate when Vance, furious that the rookie is being handed his case, quits in a rage, declaring he's put too many of his own failed marriages into this airline to be sidelined. Daniel steps up to run the whole legal department and personally take on the Falcon lawsuit, vowing to win it or quit, and the board, egged on by Captain Jack, treats Jackie's decision to trust this unknown Brit as further proof that she's a flighty little girl who can't be trusted to run her daddy's company. Daniel actually defends her to the board, comparing himself to a world-class footballer slumming it on a Sunday pub team, which is peak British male confidence, and grudgingly wins them over for now. And Vance's exit is its own little tragedy comedy, because the man does not go quietly. He goes in a blaze of wounded ego, sputtering about how much of himself he's poured into this airline, how many marriages he sacrificed on its altar, how the firm would be nothing without him, and then he storms out into what he assumes is the wilderness, never suspecting that the wilderness is about to hand him a food truck and the only genuine happiness he's ever known. But in this moment, we don't know that yet, so all we get is the spectacle of the office's most feared man rage quitting because a nervous Brit got handed his toy. And it's the kind of departure that feels enormous and consequential, and is, in fact, the best thing that will ever happen to him. He thinks he's slamming the door on his life's work. He's actually opening the door to a parking lot, a spatula, and inner peace, and the dramatic irony of watching a man storm out of the wrong life is one of the quiet pleasures the movie sets up early and pays off beautifully later. And I love how the board meetings function as their own little horror genre running parallel to the romance, because every time Jackie walks into that room, she's walking into an ambush of polite condescension. These are men who have decided, collectively and permanently, that the woman who built their company into a giant is a girl playing dress-up in her father's chair, and they have an entire vocabulary for it, a whole arsenal of words like rash and emotional and impulsive that they only ever deploy at her, and never at each other. Daniel watches one of these meetings and is genuinely baffled, because to his outsider eyes Jackie is obviously the sharpest person in the building, and yet she has to fight, every single time, just to be granted the basic assumption of competence that every mediocre man in that room was handed at birth. The board doesn't fear Jackie the way the staff does. The board doesn't fear Jackie at all, which is its own kind of insult, and the movie lets that injustice simmer under everything, so that when Daniel later names it out loud, the whole audience exhales, because we've been watching it happen in every boardroom scene and quietly screaming about it the entire time. But the message is clear. Jackie is one bad decision away from being replaced, and her own father is the one holding the knife. And then comes the trip, the rom-com engine room, because Jackie has to fly down to the Dominican Republic to give a deposition for a different lawsuit. This one involving a passenger who, and I'm reading directly from the movie's notes, urinated on a cockpit door. She takes Daniel along after an agonizing, deeply funny meeting where the entire staff debates whether she should bring Daniel or another lawyer named Rachel, with everyone aggressively pretending it's not obvious that Jackie wants Daniel, until she just snaps and picks him. And that meeting is a small masterpiece of everyone knows but nobody says, because the entire room has clearly clocked the situation, the whole staff can read the air, and yet they all participate in this elaborate theater of pretending it's a neutral logistical decision about which lawyer is best suited for a deposition in the Dominican Republic. Somebody floats Rachel's name with the studied innocence of a person who knows exactly what they are doing. Somebody else lists Daniel's qualifications a little too eagerly. And Jackie sits there, the most powerful person in the company, watching her own staff conduct a séance around her obvious crush, until she can't take the charade for one more second and just declares it's Daniel, with the particular irritation of a person who knows she's being transparent and resents that everyone is making her say it out loud. It's the office comedy equivalent of a parent insisting they don't have a favorite child while the whole family stares at the favorite child. Nobody is fooled, least of all Jackie, and the gap between what's being said and what everyone knows is the engine of the entire scene. And on the plane, the movie drops its best running gag, because Jackie Cruz isn't just the CEO of an airline. She's also genuinely a pilot. The thing from the commercials, the thing Daniel assumed was pure marketing, is real. She flies the plane herself, the original little plane, Cruz 1, the one she learned to fly on her father's lap at 13, the plane that, by ferrying one rich guy in the back to pay for gas, slowly became an entire airline. It is the one part of her life that is purely, joyfully hers, and watching her light up in that cockpit, Daniel falls the rest of the way. And the flight down is a perfect little rom-com pressure cooker, because it's just the two of them alone in the sky in a tiny plane with nothing to do but flirt and try desperately not to. Daniel sits in the back, white-knuckled, pretending he doesn't want to come up front, until Jackie tells him the only way to talk to her is to put on a headset and sit in the cockpit, which is the aviation equivalent of come a little closer. They share the story of the plane, the photo of 13-year-old Jackie on her dad's lap learning to fly, the admission that she sometimes spent more time with her father up in that cockpit than she ever did on the ground, and you realize the airline isn't just her job, it's the last place her dad ever really saw her, before he started seeing her as a problem to manage. And then, because the universe is a rom-com screenwriter, they hit turbulence, real turbulence, and Daniel panics, and Jackie, steady as anything, grabs his hand and tells him, "Look at me, I've got you. I will not let you fall out of the sky," and then immediately ruins the moment by admitting that phrasing made it sound worse, which is the exact ratio of sincere to silly this movie runs on. He's terrified. She's in her element, and he is never, ever recovering from this woman. Once they are on the ground in paradise, the movie stops pretending these two are there for work. They do the whole dance, the dinner that's obviously a date, switching their plates because they already function like a couple, agreeing to just one drink, and then of course a band plays the perfect song, because in this universe a good song is a legally binding contract, and these two simply cannot be trusted near a dance floor. Daniel, ever the lawyer, even reads the company's anti-fraternization policy aloud as a formal objection to what they are about to do, and Jackie overrules him with 2 words, "Shut up," and he, delighted, says, "Sustained," and that's it. That's the whole courtship, a man and a woman flirting in legal jargon until they finally give in. And it's great and it's giddy, and the next morning they're already trying to negotiate the terms of never doing it again, which, as any rom-com veteran knows, is the surest possible sign they are going to do it again, immediately and constantly. Down in paradise they do the thing. They have the work dinner that is obviously a date, they switch meals because they are already a couple and don't know it, they get talked into one drink, and then there's dancing because there is always dancing, and these two cannot be trusted near a good song. And despite Daniel gallantly reciting, like an attorney, the company's interoffice dating policy as a formal recommendation against what they are about to do, Jackie shuts him up, and in his words, "Sustained," they sleep together. And it's great. Daniel, who admits his usual move in the bedroom is to lie very still and apologize the entire time, has apparently leveled up considerably, and the two of them tumble into the kind of giddy, can't keep our hands off each other secret romance that makes the whole middle of the movie sing. Back home, the secret relationship blooms and we get the single weirdest, most delightful reveal in the film. Jackie has a secret room in her house, and it is full floor to ceiling of British memorabilia, a throne, royal everything. And she tries to play it off as a long-running joke that her dad was stationed in Britain, that she picks up trinkets at the airport, that her friend Sydney kept buying her British junk ironically until it became a whole room. But Daniel and the audience can read the room literally. Jackie has a thing for British guys. Daniel is, to use his word, her kink. And the movie cashes this in immediately with a royal-themed roleplay where Daniel, in a guard's hat, has to stand at attention and protect the queen no matter what she does to him, and I will leave the rest to your imagination, except to say, keep the hat on. This is a movie that found out its leading lady is secretly into Union Jacks and committed to the bit with both hands. And the cascade of excuses Jackie offers for the room is the best part, because she does the thing everyone does when caught with an embarrassingly specific collection, which is over-explain it into oblivion. It started with her dad being stationed there, you see, perfectly innocent, and then there were a few little airport gift shop trinkets, completely normal, and then her friend Sydney got the joke going and just kept buying her more and more royal junk as a gag until, well, somehow mysteriously, against all odds, it accidentally became an entire dedicated chamber containing a throne. Nobody assembles a throne ironically. There is no version of events where a person ends up with a literal throne and royal regalia floor to ceiling by accident. Daniel, a man not famous for reading a room, reads this room instantly and completely, because the room is a confession, and the realization washes over his face that he is not merely a man Jackie likes. He is, specifically, the entire aesthetic she has been building a secret shrine to for years. He is a walking gift shop. He is the fantasy in a nice suit. And the look on his face when he understands he has stumbled into the exact center of this woman's most private daydream is the look of a man who has just won a lottery he didn't know he'd entered. And the secret relationship stretch is the movie at its most charming because it's where Jackie finally lets the door come all the way open, and the woman the whole office is terrified of turns out to be a complete goofball. She does a little happy dance when her food is delicious. She admits she likes eating lunch outside in the freezing cold because she likes to keep an eye on her competition, the Manhattan skyline she grew up staring at, thinking one day she'd be good enough to be one of them, and Daniel, without missing a beat, tells her Manhattan couldn't handle her and means it. They lie around trading the dumb, intimate questions of new lovers. Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you believe in magic? Do you believe in true love? And Daniel, who walked into this movie a buttoned-up cynic, admits that since he first walked into her office, he believes in everything. It's syrupy. It's adorable. It's two workaholics discovering that the thing they were both too busy to want was, embarrassingly, just somebody to be a weirdo with. But the movie is careful to keep the ache underneath the sugar because we finally learn why Jackie sealed herself away in the first place, and it's the oldest wound there is. She did this once before. She let a man see the real her, the sandy bum, food dancing, unguarded her, and she married him. And then he decided he preferred to see his secretary, and the entire office knew before she did, and the humiliation of it sent her so far into her shell that she built a whole intimidating persona to live in instead. So when Daniel coaxes the real Jackie back out into the light, it isn't a small thing. It's her risking the exact wound that nearly destroyed her, betting that this time the man who sees the real her won't trade her in. Which is precisely why the betrayal she's about to feel when she thinks he's been lying to her cuts down to the bone, and why the movie has to put them through the ringer before it lets them land. But every rom-com needs its Act 2 collapse, and this one has two beautifully stupid ones. First, Daniel's secret. Jackie, convinced his weekend disappearances mean he's hiding another woman, follows him all the way to the prison where she meets Lizzie and learns the truth, that the secret wasn't a lover, it was a sister, a sacrifice, the most noble thing about him. But instead of melting, they have a fight because Daniel feels spied on and Jackie feels lied to, and she has a very specific, very raw reason for hating being lied to. She tells the story of surprising her then-husband on a work trip, knocking on his hotel door in nothing but knee-high boots and a raincoat like a romantic, only to slowly realize over the following years that the reason he didn't want her that night wasn't that he was sick, it was that his mistress was hiding in the room the whole time. That's the wound. That's why Jackie went into her shell and turned into the terrifying Ice Queen the whole office tells ghost stories about. She let one man see the real her, the sandy bum, goofy food dance, actual her, and he chose his secretary. So she sealed that woman away and became MS. Cruz, and Daniel is the first person in years to coax her back out, which is exactly why his perceived dishonesty cuts so deep. And then comes collapse number 2, the public one. At a press conference about the airline's bright future, a reporter raises the Falcon lawsuit and the whisper that Jackie got those Dallas gates through an improper relationship. And Jackie, cornered, panicking, protecting the company, looks into the cameras and declares emphatically that she would never sleep with a colleague, never sleep with an employee, and never, ever sleep with her lawyer. With Daniel standing right there. It's the right legal move and the worst romantic one, a public triple-barreled denial of the man she's actually falling for, and you can watch it land on him like a dropped anvil. They agree afterward that they have to end it, that they are not worth her company, her life's work, and they do the sad, mature, grown-up breakup where two people who clearly adore each other talk themselves out of it for all the responsible reasons. It is the most functional, well-communicated breakup I've ever seen, which somehow makes it worse. And there is something genuinely cruel about how reasonable they both are about it, because a normal rom-com breakup is a screaming match, a misunderstanding, a door slammed in the rain, and you can comfort yourself that it's not real, that they're just being dramatic. But these two don't do drama. They sit down like the two competent adults they are and they lay out the case calmly, point by point, like two lawyers reviewing a settlement, and the case is airtight, and that's the horror of it. They agree she could lose the company. They agree his career is at stake. They agree the timing is impossible and the policy is real and the stakes are too high, and every single thing they say is correct, and they hold hands while they say it. And they talk each other out of the best thing that's ever happened to either of them with the gentle thoroughness of people who respect each other far too much to make it easy. It's the breakup as a meeting of the minds, two workaholics doing one final flawless piece of teamwork, and the teamwork is dismantling the very thing that made them a team. You almost wish they'd just yell. At least yelling would mean there was hope. In the middle of all this, the movie keeps its comic engine roaring, mostly through Sydney, Jackie's fiercely loyal, gloriously pregnant best friend, who was, in her own words, artificially inseminated specifically to avoid the distraction of her relationship, and who refuses to take maternity leave because work is her priority and her household will consist of her, the baby, and an army of nanas. Sydney's arc climaxes when she goes into labor in the middle of the office and gives birth right there, with Daniel, the only person around, forced to deliver the baby while narrating every horrifying step in his polite British way, asking for consent to look, marveling at how hairy the baby's head is, and refusing to remove anyone's underpants without explicit permission. And Sydney, mid-delivery, uses the leverage of childbirth to interrogate Daniel about whether he and Jackie slept together, literally refusing to push until he confesses, until Daniel finally screams the truth, "Yes, we had sex, it happened, now please push," and a baby girl is born into the chaos of a forced relationship confession. It is the most this movie has ever movied, and it is glorious. And the genius of that scene, beyond the sheer chaos of a man delivering a baby while being forced to confess his sex life, is that it pops the secret at the worst possible moment, because the truth is now out, at least to Sydney, exactly as the walls are closing in. Because Bill Button, the rival CEO, was always playing a deeper game. The lawsuit, the whole song and dance about the Dallas gates, was never meant to win in court. It was a fishing expedition, a way to keep Jackie under a microscope long enough for his real weapon to do its work, a private investigator with a camera, who has spent the whole movie quietly photographing Jackie and Daniel being exactly as indiscreet as two people in a forbidden office romance inevitably are. And now Bill lays the trap on the table, calm as anything, over an expensive scotch. Give me the gates or I release the photos. Hand over the prize and look like a CEO who folded, or get exposed for sleeping with an employee, the precise scandal the lawsuit pretended to be about, and hand the board the exact ammunition they need to finally push you out. There is no clean way out. Every door leads to Jackie losing the company she gave her whole life to, and the cruelest part is that the thing being used to destroy her is the first genuinely happy thing she's let herself have in years. And looming over all of it, the way he has the entire movie, is her father. Captain Jack, the beloved old mascot, the war hero on the commercials, who still sits on the board and still calls his CEO daughter Little Fatty and still, at every turn, treats her judgment as a cute hobby that the grown-ups occasionally have to correct. The board doesn't even need Bill's photos to want Jackie gone. They've been itching to replace her with some prep school Ivy Leaguer for years, and her own dad keeps handing them the language to do it, framing her every bold call as a rash, emotional, girlish mistake. So by the time the blackmail lands, Jackie isn't just fighting a rival or protecting a secret. She's up against the oldest, deepest cage there is, the one built by a parent who loves you and underestimates you in exactly equal measure, and never notices the contradiction. Then the screws tighten because Bill Button, the rival CEO suing Aircrews, plays his real card. The lawsuit was never going to win, and he knew it. It was cover for blackmail. He hired a private investigator who got photographs of Jackie and Daniel together, and now he offers Jackie a lose-lose. Hand over the Dallas gates or he releases the photos, which will get her fired for sleeping with an employee, the exact scandal the whole lawsuit was pretending to be about. Release the gates and look like a failed CEO, or get exposed and look like a hypocrite. Either way, the board and her father get the excuse they've been hunting for to finally take her company. Jackie is trapped, and the thing she built, the thing she sacrificed her whole personal life for, is about to be taken by an old man with a folder of pictures. And here's where the movie quietly gets a heart, courtesy of the most unexpected guru imaginable. Peter Vance, the terrifying burrito-choking litigator, has, in the aftermath of his near-death experience, completely transformed. He's left the law. He now happily works a food truck, calling out order numbers with the serenity of a monk, declaring that there's love in the burrito and that he's found his true calling in service. And when Jackie comes to him, lost, the man who once threatened to make grown lawyers cry gives her the only real advice in the movie. Figure out what's most important to you. There's a voice inside you. It took him 40 years and a sausage chunked to the windpipe to hear his. All she has to do is listen. And I cannot overstate how much I love the Peter Vance redemption arc, because it is the most unhinged spiritual journey in the film. This is a man we met as a snarling, divorce-ravaged litigator who bragged about emotionally destroying people for sport. And a near-death burrito experience has rebuilt him from the ground up into a serene burrito truck philosopher who calls out order numbers like a Buddhist monk ringing a bell, insists there's love in the food, and says he lives in service now. He gave the truck back to the man he originally sued, learned to cook from him, learned, in his words, how to chew his food properly, which is both a literal lesson and the entire theme of the movie wearing an apron. He is proof that the busiest, most armored people are sometimes one catastrophe away from realizing they were starving the whole time. And when Jackie, the busiest, most armored person of all, comes to him lost, he doesn't give her a legal strategy. He gives her the only thing that matters. Figure out what's actually important to you and listen to the voice you've been drowning out with work. It's the kind of wisdom that only sounds profound coming from a man holding a spatula, and somehow that makes it land harder. So everything converges. Daniel, knowing the photographs make him a liability that could sink her, falls on his sword, resigns, and prepares to vanish into a big Manhattan firm he accurately predicts will be teeming with dickheads. The blackmail clock is ticking. The board is circling. Jackie's father is sharpening the same old condescension. And Jackie is standing at the exact crossroads the whole movie has been driving her toward, where she has to decide whether she is going to keep being the careful, shrunken, permission-seeking version of herself that survives, or whether she's finally going to be the whole person, the pilot and the CEO and the goofy woman in the secret royal room, and risk everything to actually live. The voice Vance told her about is getting louder. She's about to listen. And when this particular woman finally stops asking the men in her life for permission, it is extremely satisfying to watch. So Daniel, knowing the photos make it impossible for him to keep representing her, and knowing he's the liability that could sink her, resigns, planning to take a big soulless job in Manhattan, absolutely teeming, he predicts, with dickheads. But on his way out, he gives Jackie the speech that the whole movie has been building toward, and it's not about the lawsuit, and it's not even really about them. He tells her she is an exceptional CEO, and that he cannot understand why a woman this brilliant lets one man tell her what to do. And she assumes he means the blackmailer Bill. But he doesn't. He means her father. He tells her that next to her, Captain Jack is nothing, a joke, a mascot, a beloved old face on a commercial coasting on a company his daughter actually runs, and that the only thing truly standing in Jackie's way has never been a lawsuit or a rival or a folder of photos. It's been her own refusal to stop being daddy's little girl. She throws him out for it, because it's true, and the truest things are the ones that make you slam the door. And from there, the movie does exactly what you want a rom-com to do, which is let the woman who has spent the entire film being underestimated finally stop asking for permission. Jackie listens to the voice Vance told her about. She stops playing defense. She decides that she will not be blackmailed, will not be managed, will not be Gordita in the boardroom for one more second, and she takes her power back from every man who's been holding a piece of it. The rival with the photos, the board with the doubts, and most of all the father with the nickname. She reclaims the company on her own terms, as her own woman, the pilot and the CEO and the goofy girl who does a happy food dance, all of her, no longer split into the Ice Queen for the office and the real one for the secret room. And of course, because we have earned it, she goes and gets her British idiot back before he can disappear into a Manhattan firm full of the very dickheads he predicted. The grand gesture, the airport-adjacent reunion, the whole gloriously earned rom-com landing. Daniel keeps the hat on. Lizzie presumably approves from prison loudly with profanity. Sydney's baby gets a ridiculous aunt and uncle. And the most unromantic woman in the airline business finally lets someone see the sandy bum and stays out of her shell for good. So that's office romance. A filthy, big-hearted, genuinely funny rom-com about two workaholics who fall in love against every rule in the employee handbook, wrapped around a surprisingly real story about a brilliant woman learning to stop shrinking herself to fit in her father's shadow. It's got a CEO who flies her own planes, a lawyer who reports handshake erections to his incarcerated sister, an office berth used as a confession booth, a secret room full of royal merchandise, and the single most heroic burrito truck redemption arc ever filmed. It is exactly the palate cleanser I needed, and maybe you did too. If it made you laugh, you know what to do, and if you've stuck with me through all four of these very different movies, you are an absolute, and I mean this in the warmest, most British way possible, you cheeky thing. Until next time, keep your tray table up, tip your burrito guy, and remember, it's only against the rules if they catch you. Cheerio.